TOMRA Food, which we will hear on stage here in a few moments, have wide experience and knowledge when it comes to advanced analytic technology for gardening, sorting, and peeling. James French, VP Head of Innovation at TOMRA Food, will now give us some insights on how AI works in this sector and why it's beneficial for the post-harvest and food processing industry. Welcome on stage, James.
Thank you. I'm here to talk a bit about artificial intelligence, which I think is a really interesting and exciting technology. Some of you may have seen recently all the developments with new tools like ChatGPT, which are looking to threaten a lot of the existing ways that we do things in lots of different industries. So I think now is a good time to talk about it. And I think why it's important for this industry, the food and the fruit industry in particular, it's going to have a huge impact, and it's already starting to have that impact in some ways which are much less visible to us, but it will start to become a lot more visible over time as more and more of the touch points that fruit encounters throughout the value chain become optimized and affected by the use of artificial intelligence technology. It's critical to understand how to use it, whether you're an equipment developer, when you really need to understand it to a low level, and to a high level of detail, or whether you're a grower or a packer where you just need to use it as a tool, but in order to make the right selection for your tool and to make the most of it, you need to know what questions to ask. I think you also need to understand the limitations with any technology, where you can push it to get results and where you need to understand that it's not necessarily going to solve all of your problems. I think the food industry, as I said before, is already being impacted by this technology and in some ways, as I said, are invisible. The prediction of customer demand for certain products, I'm sure that is happening quietly in the background using artificial intelligence technology for fruit as well as it is happening for lots of other commodities. Analyzing of data for supply chain operations, for optimizing shipments and packaging and things like that. I'm certain that's happening as well. And I know for a fact that it's happening in food sorting and grading. That it's really starting to move the needle quite quickly in terms of how accurate grading and sorting is. Basically, artificial intelligence allows machines to do the kind of tasks that typically have required human intelligence and judgment and input to be able to do. And like a good staff member in your company, it needs training, it needs supervision, and it needs really good, accurate data in order to make the best decisions for you. So before I get further into the detail, a little bit of background on myself. As said before, I'm the VP Head of Innovation for TOMRA Food. I've been working with the company since 2010 in the post-harvest automation field. It's really all I've known for more than a decade now. I'm based in Hamilton, New Zealand, but we have teams all around the world and customers all around the world. So I love getting out and about with the customers and coming over and attending functions like this as well. My AI team has been working on these kind of problems that I'm going to talk about since 2018. In 2019, we were one of the first to market in the fruit grading space with an AI-based solution with the Kato Lukai blueberry grading platform. So blueberries have some interesting challenges in that they're a small product that has quite high requirements for how well it's graded for fresh consumption. And very high throughput is required. So we had to solve some very unique problems to get AI working with that, and we've been very successful in doing so. So diving a bit deeper into artificial intelligence, let's start with what it is, and what it is in the context of this fruit and food industry. As you may know, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different industries, but what does it specifically mean to fruit? So what I said before, it's the ability of computers to mimic human thought and to mimic human decision making. So what that entails is an automated system learning how to solve a problem, and then the application of actually solving that problem, making those decisions on the fly, and recognizing patterns in data that you provide it. This data can be images, it can be any kind of signal or any other data, consumer data, surveys, all of those kinds of options. AI, artificial intelligence, typically is a combination of software algorithms and data that are running on a computer or a phone or whatever. You can combine these with electromechanical things like an actuator or a robot or anything like that to actually affect your decisions. Some of the applications will be just data alone. It'll tell you what you need to do. It'll make that decision for you. But in a lot of the applications, it'll actually physically take that action for you. It'll select that piece of fruit or it'll move something for you. Machine learning, which is often used in combination with artificial intelligence, is a key software technique that is widely used to deliver artificial intelligence solutions. So machine learning is when you're training a statistical model iteratively, so you're training it over and over again with small changes using what's called labeled data, and we'll get into that a bit more later. This training process requires expertise and supervision. So somebody, an expert, usually a PhD in many cases, needs to be there kind of turning the knobs and the dials to make sure that that training results in a system that has a higher performance. Just using standard off-the-shelf things, will often get to a level of performance, but not to the high level that you need. So that's machine learning. So deep learning is further a subset of machine learning. So we're 3 levels in now to artificial intelligence. And deep learning is machine learning that uses a neural network as the statistical model. So a neural network is sort of like it's modeled on the human brain, but it is much simpler than the brain. It usually has less layers and it's obviously a lot less complicated. To understand how all this comes together, I'll give an example of a typical implementation in the fruit industry. So a normal implementation would be what's called a classifier. So that's something that looks at data and decides what class that data belongs to, or that data point belongs to. So that's kind of making a decision based on a whole input of data. So in order to have a classifier, you first need to collect a sample of the data that you're going to run the classification algorithm on. So that might be images of fruits, it might be survey data from a consumer, it could be a shipping report, any kind of data. You then need to label that data. So that's when you annotate or add information to that data in order to tell the system what class that data belongs to. So if it's an image of a piece of fruit, you would give it a label saying it contains a defect that you're interested in or it doesn't contain it. If it's a consumer acceptance survey, you might say that this was a positive survey or a negative survey. So that's the labeling effort. Then we need to train the system. So that's the combination of the data, the label, and the model. So iteratively go through the system and tweak the values in the model in order to get the behavior that when you put the data in, you get the right classification out. That will give you the model. You then have to deploy it to some kind of system to action that, and then you do what's called inferencing. So inferencing is where how the AI systems actually work in practice. It's when you put the raw unlabeled data, so the system's never seen that data before, into it, and then you ask it for the result. What class does it think that's in the instance for a classifier? So yeah, I realize there's a lot of new terms here probably for some of you, but I think it's important to get a handle on these, to talk about it effectively. So why might we want to use AI in post-harvest and in food processing? What properties does our industry have that makes it suitable for this kind of approach to problem solving? The first property is that we have a lot of data. We have weather data coming from weather stations in our orchards and national weather stations and forecasts and all kinds of things like that. We have harvest data, our yields, our qualities, the yield per area for that row, for that variety, for that season. We have post-harvest data, again, yields, packouts, different products that have been produced, any returns or quality failures. We have logistics data, and we have consumer data. We have honestly probably more data than we know what to do with in a lot of instances, which makes this ripe for opportunity to get support in making decisions. Along with that data, we have complex optimization problems that have a lot of variability and seasonality. We have to make decisions like, is this piece of fruit in grade or out of grade for this variety, for this customer, for this season, for this hour almost? That's a really complex decision to make, and it's one that at the moment takes a lot of experience and a lot of judgment and a lot of knowledge of different parts of the industry to make successfully. That's a perfect application for artificial intelligence, to connect all of those different data sources together and to optimize how that decision is made. How do we allocate our raw materials, our unsorted product, to our finished goods? So what kind of pack out do we want to have? What do we want to put in small packages and large packages? What do we want to send to export? What do we want to send to domestic? Highly complex optimization problem that, again, at the moment requires a lot of experience and history in the industry in order to do effectively. Again, that's one where an artificial intelligence system can look back at the decisions that have been made in history and see the outcomes and then make better and better predictions as we go forward. So some of those roles that have typically been very key for industries like ours might start to become more automated, which will be a very interesting change. Another question might be, what's my yield going to be this season? How complex is that? You've got to look forward to predict the weather. You've got to look past to look at what the weather was the previous season to know how many fruiting buds have been set up. That's a very difficult prediction to make, and one that we often get very wrong with the manual techniques that we use at the moment and the limited sampling that we do, and I think that's another area that will be heavily impacted. And finally, we have factors that mean that these problems that we're facing aren't as easy to solve using traditional techniques, which you might find in other forms of manufacturing or production. We have seasonality. No season is ever the same one to another. So we're never looking at the same set of inputs or variables that we are one year to the next. The opportunities that we have to train and retain human experts to do this are impacted by the seasonal nature of our industry. When your season's only 4 or 6 weeks long, as it might be for blueberries or cherries or another kind of short window crop, having an expert that has a lot of history in the industry that is probably needs to be very well paid to justify that is very difficult. And retaining that person year after year is also very difficult. And then lastly, the biological nature of our products and the ingredients that we're using means that every single item that we're looking at is typically unique. There's no other one like it. So that variability makes traditional algorithms less useful in the space, or less able to be complete solutions to the problem, whereas artificial intelligence, because of the training system, is quite good at being flexible towards that variability that we see in biological organisms. Next slide. So what impact? We've talked about a bit about what artificial intelligence is, a bit about why I think that there's lots of problems that are suitable for this technology in the fruit industry. So what kind of impact could applying that technology to those problems have day to day? I think one of them is maximizing the value from raw materials, and I already touched on that. to optimize the raw materials that we're having in, the ungraded fruit, to our finished products. And then to follow on from that, matching our products to our customer demand. So connecting that dot right from where we have our raw product right through to where we want the destination of that product to be, to maximize the value of it, to maximize the customer experience, the eating experience, and to maximize the potential revenue that we generate from it. We can create a more consistent product by grading and sorting more accurately, which means that we can then start to do things with that product which we haven't been able to before. We can rely on it to last longer, to have more shelf life, and to behave more consistently for consumers. We can sort and grade product closer to specifications. So that means that we can get more of our product into the top specifications and get a higher yield based on the same kind of input. And you can get away with maximizing the amount of kind of less grade product that you can have in your top grade just by writing those limits very accurately. And we can also look at extracting a premium product from a lower grade of input product, whereas in the past you might have had a rain event for a season or something like that, and that might have meant that your crop was written off. You couldn't produce a premium product that year. With the accuracy that we're seeing from artificial intelligence, it means that every year, if the fruit is in there, you'll be able to accurately select the premium fruit and have that top value product there to sell. So that's some points where we can maximize the value of the product we have. If we look at the other side of that coin, we can reduce the waste. So by sorting and grading more accurately, we end up with less of our good product in the waste at the end, and less of our good product downgraded to the next grade. So that helps us reduce food waste. We can reduce recalls and rejected shipments. That's got to be one of the hardest things in this industry, when you go to all the work of growing and packing and shipping a product and then it gets rejected at the destination. So being able to have intelligence on on how that product is going to behave at the destination market will allow us to reduce that liability. So that will be achieved through predicting future fruit quality, which will definitely help us reduce waste and optimize the use of the fruit. We can send the product that has the longer life to the longer, farther away destinations. We can predict future demand for our different products, so we don't end up wasting time in packaging by putting products in the wrong package or in the wrong kind of finished good. And we can help manage stock levels more effectively. So by understanding what you have in terms of your inventory of raw goods, you can make optimal decisions about how to utilize that to maximize the use and reduce the waste. So that's a few points on how we might be able to use AI to reduce waste. We can also use it to improve efficiency. We can reduce the labor needed for a given output or throughput in a facility. And we can improve the plant utilization by improving the scheduling decisions, making those more intelligent, and by running closer to capacity more often, by automating intelligently lots of the different decisions that are made to integrate different components in facilities. And lastly, I think we can have a big impact on maintenance by intelligently performing predictive maintenance. By looking at the failures in the past, we can predict when they might occur in the future and then intervene before they happen, before that failure happens. We can also support this with some intelligent diagnostics where when a problem does occur or the behavior is not as you need it to be or expect it to be, by putting a lot of intelligence into how you solve that problem to mean that you don't need necessarily such an expert level of user to be able to solve it. And that means that we can potentially reduce our reliance on highly skilled labor and highly skilled operators, which are not easy to attract and retain in many industries. So we've talked a bit about some of the impacts that it could have in the industry, the positive impacts. So what are the limitations of artificial intelligence? What are the problems or the challenges that it will face in order to solve these problems? I think the number one is data. AI needs a large quantity of high quality data. As any kind of problem solving goes, whether it's a human or whether it's a machine, you can only make a decision as good as your data. The variability in our industry that I've talked about before means that we need even more than a lot of different instances. If you're Tesla making a self-driving system and you're trying to decide what's a car and what's a truck, there's only a certain subset of what those things can look like. You can get a list of every car and every truck on the road. You can't get a list of every piece of fruit that you'll ever see because everyone will be unique. So that means that we need more data than a lot of other cases. In our experience in the blueberry industry, because of some of those difficulties that I talked about with the small variable product, there's actually 3 species of product that are packed and called blueberries. That meant that we needed really large sample sets in order to make an effective system there. We ended up collecting and hand labeling around 100,000 fruit images, which maybe 100,000 is a number that sounds kind of easy, but when you have to have an expert look at every single one of those and decide what it is, that's a lot of work and a lot of investment you have to put in there to get an effective machine. So that data, we know that we need a lot of it and it needs to be high quality, so we need good sensors collecting that data. If the property isn't visible in the data that we're collecting, then an AI system can't make a better decision on that. So we need very good cameras, we need very good sensors, weight sensors, all of those different points that we're collecting the data. The better that data is, the more you will be able to do with, the better your decisions will be through artificial intelligence, and the more you'll be able to do with less of that data because it's higher quality. So it doesn't mean that artificial intelligence doesn't mean that you can just put a smartphone over a conveyor belt and it solves all your problems. You still need good cameras, good sensors, the best cameras and best sensors to make the best decisions. Labeling, a task that I've touched on a couple of times, is the key really to getting good performance out of artificial intelligence. The system will only ever work as well as your labels are created. You'll inevitably get some error with labeling. You'll have somebody accidentally misclassify something. They'll say this was a good piece of fruit when it was really bad. Or they'll say this is a split or a bird peck on the piece of fruit when it was really another defect. Those errors will limit the ability of your system to become more and more efficient. So labeling sounds like the kind of task that you'd really want to outsource and you get students to do or something like that, because staring at hundreds of thousands of images of fruit day after day and drawing boxes around defects on them doesn't sound like my kind of fun. So it's very tedious work, but it's also very critical, which is not a very good combination when you've got a task that needs to be done to a high level of accuracy with a high level of expertise, but is really boring. So that's definitely a challenge with AI. This might be a surprise to some of you, but most AI systems, especially that we're using in our industry, don't learn on the fly. So this is something that I've encountered in discussions with customers, is that they expect that when an artificial intelligence system is running, it's just getting better at what it's doing. But that is the case with some subsets of artificial intelligence, but not with the ones that we're likely to make the most use of in this industry. So the systems are static. Unless you're labeling new data and retraining the model and redeploying that model, the system is performing at a static level of performance. So that's where it's unlike a human operator or a human grader, who is often getting better and better because they're closing that feedback loop themselves. AI systems are the opposite of transparent. They are black boxes. You put your data in and you get your decision out, and you don't know how it got to that decision. And you don't really get to ask any questions. You just get the decision out. So, I mean, that's great, and that they're quite straightforward to use, but if you want a different decision, it can be quite challenging to figure out how to get that result. You need to go back to your data and your labels and your training and really review that. So the opaqueness of artificial intelligence systems is definitely a big challenge there. Creativity, or the lack of it. An AI system, by definition, is working inside the box that you give it. It is working within the labels and the data that you've provided it. So it's not going to spontaneously decide one day that there's a better way to make this decision or a better way to solve this problem. It's just going to solve the problem how you've told it to solve the problem. So again, that's a limitation that we need to be aware of, that we don't get stuck doing something the same way when there might be a much better way to do it. This might not seem like a lot of challenges, maybe it does, but some of those problems are really big and quite hard to solve. We're lucky with artificial intelligence. There's some really big players working on it, some of the biggest players in the greater tech industry. But yeah, there's certain aspects to those challenges that we need to solve specifically for the food industry. So yeah, there's some challenges there. So we've talked about where in the food industry it could have impacts. What are some of the limitations? So where should we watch out for first? What are the kind of problems that are going to be the first that get solved with this kind of technology? I think the first that I want to talk about anyway is grading and sorting, and it's already there. I mean, you can walk around the halls today and many of the grading and sorting stands will mention AI. It will be used to different levels, and maybe you've got some ideas on some good questions to ask different suppliers from what we've talked about here today. I think it will start with just improving accuracy. It'll be basically a bolt-on to the existing systems and make them work more accurately. I think the next step from that is allowing us to optimize what is going in each particular pack. So by getting really specific about, I want one apple with this kind of blemish in this box, and the accuracy gives you the confidence to be able to do that reliably. I think it's going to progress, and this is how I want it to progress, to solutions that you interact with in a much more natural way. So typically with grading and sorting equipment, you have to interact with it in quite a technical way. You have to learn how it works in order to get the best results out of it. I think with artificial intelligence, we'll be able to make the systems interpret what you need much more like a colleague or an employee would. You might even be able to talk to your machine and say, I need a little bit less of this in the pack or a little bit more of this. And I think that will be a great service to the industry, because at the end of the day, grading and sorting equipment is a tool that you need to use in order to accomplish what you need to accomplish, and you should be able to interact with that in a natural way. So that's grading and sorting, where to look out for coming up soon or already out there in the industry. The next space is in the optimization, kind of supervision and decision support space. I think it's going to start with frameworks that help suggest optimizations, like a modern version of the little Clippy suggestion tool in Microsoft Office, where it looks at what you're trying to achieve and suggests maybe some tweaks or some optimal ways to achieve that. It might be like what order you need to pack the inventory you've got, or what kind of composition you need to make to optimize a given product that you're making. Predictive maintenance, as I've talked about, will have intelligent suggestions regarding what work could be carried out to give certain confidence levels of uptime, of OEE, to maintain that balance of cost when you're replacing a part that maybe has some life left on it versus reliability and uptime. And I think you'll be able to tweak between those two goals. Supply chain decisions. So that's already being made with data. Optimizing that is pretty straightforward. You don't really have to change anything. You just have to add in the model in the background and use the data that's already there. Lastly, the space of quality control is a big one where we're already seeing some impact, and we'll see a lot more coming soon. So quality control is a bit of an easier problem in many ways to solve than grading and sorting, because you've typically got more time to make the inferences, to make the decisions about what you're looking at. You need more accuracy. That's a good property for an artificial intelligence problem. And you can make use of technologies like cloud access, which mean that you can leverage a lot of the big infrastructural changes and developments that are being made by other players in the tech industry. So the use of cameras and other sensors to continuously manage and measure quality, and then connecting those back to unintelligent machines to intelligently optimize the entire operation of that. I think closing that loop in an intelligent way is certainly something to look out for. Yeah, so that's a few of the ideas that I've had looking at artificial intelligence for 5 years now, it is, and where I think some exciting spaces to look at for upcoming products and solutions, and some that are already out there in the market. So yeah, I hope you found it interesting. Maybe I hope you've learned a little bit today. And we're really excited at TOMRA to talk to you about our AI solutions. We've got the Kato Lukai that I mentioned, blueberries, the Mira 360, grading cherries, Spectrum, which if you're a customer, come and talk to us about. And then we have the automatic rate controller using AI to measure the throughput of products, and the 5X using AI to grade with X-rays as well. And that's just a selection of what we've got, so please come and talk to us if any of that sounds interesting. Any questions?
Thank you, James, for your presentation.
Thanks.
And you are right, we still have a bit time left, so it's your chance to clarify some questions that may popped up in your head or still are open. Are there any questions or points to discuss?
Hi.
May I invite you to come over to one of those microphones so that the audience can also hear your question? Thank you.
My question has to do with the new technologies now. You mentioned ChatGPT. And if you're seeing a specific standard or open type standard that the whole industry may be able to pick up on, or are we looking at closed systems mostly for AI?
Yeah, we are.
You know, anything that's backed up by the government, U.S. government is my question.
Yeah, we are seeing some. What we're seeing is that the industry is converging on a few different tool sets that are well supported. Not typically by government institutes, but certainly by open source institutes and by some of the big players like Google and Facebook. And those tools are starting to kind of converge in the level of performance that they give. And more of the really top end of performance is coming from how well you're collecting the data and how accurately you're labeling and how well you understand the training process. So the tools are definitely becoming quite standardized.
Do we have more questions?
So thanks for this nice presentation. I was just wondering, are you also using AI to extend the shelf life or predict the shelf life of the fruits? Is it possible? Well, what's your opinion on that?
I think the challenge with that problem probably lies a bit more in the sensor domain. You have to be able to collect the right data at the right level of accuracy in order to be able to support those decisions. It's certainly a space that we're very interested in and we're actively working in and have been for a number of years. The other aspect that challenge faces or that opportunity faces is the seasonality. Certainly with some products we've seen that year to year their composition is quite different, and the chemicals that are inside them that affect when they might lose their commercial value change year to year. So you need to have quite a few years of data in order to make good predictions for the next year of data. So certainly a really useful space to be looking in.
Thank you. Would you like to come over to the microphone, please? Thank you. Oh, there's already someone. Maybe we can take that first. Thank you.
I thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful. You mentioned the importance of accurate labeling. For someone who's starting, what is your recommendation for the best practice of doing the tedious work that you describe and making sure it's as accurate as possible?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we definitely experimented with the kind of student approach that I mentioned and found the challenges with that. And really the best quality labels that I've got are a combination of an expert in the machine learning and the data science space, and then someone who's very knowledgeable on the actual application. So that's not an easy person to get. I think in the future I'll certainly be looking to leverage the people that are experts in the application. So maybe people that work in quality control space and the people that help make our equipment run as best as it can, and then supporting them with the data science space. So I think be prepared to relabel your data is how I'd suggest that you start, because you probably won't get it right to start with.
Hi. I'm wondering, could you speak a little bit to differences between leafy vegetables versus vegetables or fruits who are like single objects, which could be easier to detect or to,
Between leafy vegetables, sorry?
Yeah, which would be like a batch product of a lot of salads.
Yeah. So I talked about one AI technique in detail called classification. So by nature, that's kind of applied to a whole object. But it can also be applied to an individual pixel or a group of pixels that you're looking at. So you could look at just a patch of an image, which might be a carpet of baby spinach or something like that, and classify that patch as good product or damaged product or maybe a weed or something like that. There's also other systems for artificial intelligence. One of them is called object detection. So that is looking through usually an image, but it can be any data source, to look for a particular object that you've taught the system to look for. So that would be the technology probably most applicable to like a leafy green. We can also use that on whole fruit products, where we might look at an apple or a kiwi or something like that and try and detect a particular defect on there. Maybe if there's a rub on it, it's of different value whether it's on the side of the fruit or at the end of the fruit. So we can use detection and classification tools together. There's a third tool which I haven't spoken about, which is called segmentation. So that's when you use AI again to paint out or codify again at a low level, like a pixel level, an area of interest. So we've used that to be able to paint out the stem on a cherry, for instance, because you want to treat that differently, usually ignore it from the rest of the cherry. So that's a technique that could be used on leafy greens as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
I apologize for taking up the mic. My background is government and IT government. We were using AI to pick up illegal images. So we were basing it on color. We would look at each pixel, and we would leverage the percentage of the picture that matched the color. And so that's how we were actually picking up images, illegal images. And it's not supposed to be a funny question, but could you use AI to help you label your labels, your data?
Yep. You can. No, that's a great question. Yeah, you can, and we do. Yeah. So I think that you could describe it as a form of bootstrapping. So we have labeling systems where you get your new raw data in, and you use your existing network to predict where those labels should be, and then the labeling person only needs to make some small corrections or verify that the label is correct or incorrect. So that can definitely be a really good tool to speed up labeling. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. One last question, maybe. If not so, I say thank you, James, for your presentation. Thanks for the questions from the audience. If you have missed parts of the whole keynote, or you want to have a closer look on the presentation, the whole keynote has been recorded and will be available online after the fair has ended on fruitlogistica.com under the section events. So you can have a look, and you may have the chance to have a detailed chat with James, or you just visit the TOMRA team at their booth, which you saw on the screen just a few moments ago. Thanks for attending this keynote. We'll be back at 11:15 with our next keynote. Thank you.